Good morning, everyone. I'm Carolyn Vermont, the Mayor's Community Liaison here for the City of Bridgeport. Our Mayor, Joseph Guillenum, wanted to be here this morning, but we have a very busy city, and so he is doing some other work on behalf of the city. But I want to take this opportunity to welcome all of you here to this Cradle to Career Regional Conference. The United Way and the Cradle to Career work has made such an impact, not just in this Bridgeport community, but beyond Bridgeport. And so it's an honor and a privilege to be here today to share support and congratulations on behalf of the City of Bridgeport. And so at this time, I would like to welcome Allison Logan, Executive Director for Bridgeport Prospers.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Allison Logan, Executive Director of Bridgeport Prospers at the United Way of Coastal Fairfield County. I would like to thank you all for attending today, our first ever regional Cradle to Career Conference. So I would like to thank and recognize the Cradle to Career Initiative and their leaders and staff. So I'm going to have some people stand up who have helped and put this morning's conference together. Please, all staff and core leadership or executive leadership teams stand and be recognized from Norwalk Acts. So if you're a leadership team or staff. Stanford Cradle to Career. Waterbury Bridge to Success. And my own staff and leadership team at Bridgeport Prospers. We would also like to thank a neighboring Strive Together Collective Impact that has joined us today from the South Bronx. So South Bronx Rising Together, please stand. And we also want to recognize any elected officials who have taken time out of their busy schedules to be here today. So if you're an elected official, please stand and be recognized. Over the last year, our 4 Strive Together sites have met on a monthly basis to collaborate, share best practices, explore policy agendas, and serve as an informal support therapy group, as this type of large-scale change is often complex, intense, ambiguous, but rewarding and game-changing all at the same time. We are honored and humbled to have the President and CEO of Strive Together, Jennifer Blatz, here this morning to deliver our keynote address. This will be followed by a moderated panel discussion, which includes cross-sector leaders from each of our 4 communities. Then we will journey into breakout sessions, which include an investors panel, a presentation from Bridgeport Prospers and Norwalk Acts about their early childhood work, and a session on diversity, equity, and inclusion from Waterbury Bridge to Success and Stanford Cradle to Career. Strive Together is a national movement with a clear purpose: help every child succeed in school and life from cradle to career, regardless of race, zip code, or circumstances. Jennifer Blatz serves as the president and CEO, where she leads strategy and operations. Prior to taking the helm at Strive Together in 2017, Jennifer helped to launch the Strive Partnership, a cross-sector cradle-to-career partnership serving Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky, and one of the most notable collective impact initiatives in the country. As Strive Partnerships Director of Operations, Jennifer helped translate the lessons learned from the work on the ground in the communities across the country to launch the National Cradle to Career Network. She is a fearless leader, amazingly supportive of the Strive Together's network's local initiatives, and comes at this work with heart, passion, and grace. Please help me welcome the President and CEO of Strive Together, Jennifer Blatz.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is an incredible turnout. I cannot believe this is your first convening of like this, and you have a full room. We just celebrated our 10th annual national convening, and to think of how much this movement has grown over the last, what I'm going to talk about, it's actually been 14 years. It's just amazing, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you to our Connecticut partnerships for inviting me. Bridgeport Prospers, Waterbury Bridge to Success, Norwalk ACTS, and Stamford Cradle to Career. I am thrilled to be able to celebrate this first convening with you. And so it's great to be back in Connecticut. Actually, I'm wondering, how many of you were in the room years ago at Stepping Stones Children's Museum when Norwalk ACTS launched? There's a few hands. Okay, I was there with you. You may not have realized that because I was there with my very charismatic predecessor, Jeff Edmondson, at the time. But Jeff and I go way back, and I know he's been with you a few times to speak with you. And I was there at the launch of that Norwalk ACTS partnership, and it's just really great to see this continued progress and momentum. And so being with you today is really special for me. And for those of you who didn't raise your hand, who don't know me as well, I just wanted to start out by sharing a little bit about who I am and how I come to this work, because I feel like it's important as I share a little bit about our story and the evolution of Strive Together. You heard I was there at the very beginning when we launched Strive Partnerships, so I've been at this a while. And I come to this, really, I'm from Kentucky, so if you've ever flown in, we were talking about this earlier, if you've ever flown into the Cincinnati airport, that's actually in northern Kentucky, and that's where I'm from. And depending on which runway you flew in, you might have landed on what used to be my grandparents' farmland. So that's a little bit about how I come to this work, and I say this because I'm a first-generation college graduate. And but from the day I was born, my parents, who as the firstborn child of two very hardworking parents, they knew that they wanted me to have that opportunity to go on to post-secondary education, and so prepared me my entire life, and my brother as well, for going on to post-secondary, because they knew that it would lead to mobility. That was our ticket for economic mobility, and so we made it. Both of us went on to post-secondary. I was the first in my family. There was a lot of celebration, and it was really exciting. And when I stepped onto the campus of University of Kentucky, if there are any basketball fans out there too, my Wildcats lost bad last night. That was bad. So I went to the University of Kentucky, first-generation college graduate, and for me, that was a transformative experience. And I wanted everyone to have that experience. So that led to many career choices. I actually went on to graduate school and became a college admissions officer. I studied higher ed and student affairs. I wanted everyone to have that opportunity to go on to post-secondary and experience what I experienced, and to achieve mobility, to be able to achieve that American dream, to do better than your parents, to be able to reach your fullest potential. And so I say all that because I've been in this work my entire career. And I'm ashamed to admit that it's been much more recently that I like to admit that I came to realize an important, very, very important challenge with sort of our education systems and structures and the path toward mobility. And that is that despite it being challenging to navigate for a first-generation college graduate like me, like I remember struggling with the financial aid forms. My parents had to get somebody to help us with those financial aid forms. I mean, if we're real about it, though, I was always going to go to college. The system privileged me. I grew up in a a safe neighborhood. I went to strong public schools, and I'm white. The system privileged me. It privileges my children. And that's what's so critical in this work, and I think as we've evolved this work, and as I have the great privilege of being able to stand up here and recognize that, yes, I worked hard, and I have privilege. And that is not the reality. That is not, the systems are designed to produce exactly the results that they produce, and right now, we know that they continue to produce, in 2019, continue to produce disparate outcomes for children of color and children living in poverty. And so that's what this work is about. This work is about transforming systems. And I will say, when Jeff and I started doing the work back in Cincinnati in 2006, it was always about every child cradle to career. But as we've increasingly worked over the last 14 years to work to improve outcomes, we've realized just how critical transforming systems. We've always talked about systems change. Now we're talking about transformation. Because these systems, they reorganize themselves to produce these same outcomes. And so we have to be really thinking about systems change and systems transformation. And that's really what I'm going to share with you today. Just a little bit about how we've evolved our approach over the last 14 years, how your 4 amazing partnerships here in Connecticut, and it's awesome to have South Bronx Rising Together in the room. Thank you for being here. How these partnerships, along with the other 60 or so partnerships across the network, are really working to be on the cutting edge of changing and transforming systems. So that's what I'm here for today, and I really look forward to the conversation. So I will admit I did not come up here and check this. Oh, it's going to go the right way for me. Okay, the cardinal rule of speaking is you should always check if you know how to work the clicker. Well, it worked for me today. Okay, so to get started, one thing that's very important about changing systems is recognizing that systems are made up of people. So that means people have to change their behavior. This cartoon is one of my favorite cartoons. It actually comes from Mission Graduate, which is one of our partnerships in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And if you look at this cartoon, does any of this look familiar to any of you? A lot of finger pointing, a lot of blame. So this cartoon, when we saw this coming from our partnership in Albuquerque, it felt so resonant for what we experienced in Cincinnati back in 2006 when we launched the Strive partnership, because we were program rich. There was great investment in supporting children and families in the community, but system poor, because we spent too much time pointing fingers and placing blame and not sharing accountability for moving outcomes. And so really this cartoon shows what we're working to change. Instead of pointing fingers, it is about sharing accountability. And I know that's why you're all here, and that's why you're involved in your local partnerships, because you believe that no matter where you come from, if you're from philanthropy or business or nonprofit sector or the education or from a district, you know that you are sharing accountability for those results for children. And so that really started the work. Back in 2005, 2006, we launched the Strive Local Partnership, has been mentioned, and we were winging it. We were trying to figure out how to get better outcomes without starting a new program. Like so many communities, the instinct, I come from a college access background, so my instinct in coming to that work, I was like, we just need a college access program. And others, felt like, oh, no, we actually need to work on early childhood. And so the work became Cradle to Career, because actually a very poignant moment when our county coroner, the Hamilton County coroner in Cincinnati at the time, was a part of one of these meetings, and he said, if you focus on a program at one part of the continuum, what I'm going to see is continue to see dead children on my table. And so that moment right there is when we realized we have to look cradle to career, and we have to change our behavior in a community. And so that thereby launched the Strive Local Partnership. And so from there, we were fortunate that Living Cities of Funders Collaborative out of New York City happened to be in Cincinnati visiting with someone else, saw what we were doing, and said they'd invest in trying this in a few other communities. That was in 2008. Then it turned out that FSG, a consulting organization, was also in Cincinnati at the time. They saw what we were doing in Cincinnati. Again, we didn't have any outcomes yet, but people were seeing this like unique way of collaborating, and they wrote the collective impact article, the seminal collective impact article that I'm sure many of you have read in 2011. And so very quickly, communities from all over the country were reaching out to us saying, how do we do what you're doing in Cincinnati? And so Jeff, my predecessor, and I, we found ourselves running around the country trying to help other partnerships start this work up. And we quickly realized that everybody everywhere said they were doing collective impact, but what they were really doing is collaboration. And we wanted to put a stake in the ground on what is collective impact. What does it really mean to do Strive Together's brand of collective impact? Strive Partnership, building on the lessons learned from Strive Partnership. So we launched what we call our theory of action. And I'll talk about this in a few minutes, but that was in 2013, and we cut the network in half. We put a stake in the ground and went to 49 partnerships from 105 because we needed to put a stake in the ground for what it means to do quality, rigorous work for putting children and families on a path toward mobility. And that was transformative for us. We're back where we are today, and this is where we are today. We are at 67 partnerships. We're always hovering around 70 partnerships, give or take. We have new partnerships coming in and other partnerships who this type of collective impact approach isn't for them. But we're across 29 states, and we're reaching, currently the national network is reaching 13.7 million children. And more than 9 million of those children are children of color. And so this is a critical scale and such a critical time for this movement. And I mentioned that we hover around 70 partnerships, and that's because, as you'll see here, all of the partnerships in our network agree to two pretty significant things. The first is this measurement framework, which is that you will measure outcomes from cradle to career. So there are an incredible number of good collective impact efforts around any of these outcome areas here. There's a national, I'm sure many of you know, national network focused on early grade reading, which is a critical milestone in a children's life. There's so much work happening around the post-secondary space, but we do have a bias towards this work has to be cradle to career. In order to put children and families on a path toward mobility, we have to be looking across the pipeline. So everyone who joins the Strive Together network, every community agrees to work cradle to career. Next, our theory of action. And so this is a much condensed version of the theory of action. If you really want to get wonky and check out our website, you can go deep into the theory of action. But this is the foundation for our work with our network. We developed, as I mentioned, the first iteration of this theory of action was built back in 2013, and it was really about trying to put a stake in the ground in our approach and being very clear about the commitment to using rigorous data, to sharing accountability, to acting collaboratively and changing practice, and ultimately to getting to sustainable systems change and systems transformation. And so this theory of action has been iterated on 4 times. It's been revised 4 times, and we're working with our network on a 5th revision that will happen in next year, in 2020. We'll have another revision, and we'll keep revising it as we keep learning. And so I'll talk a little bit about what we've learned and the shifts in a few minutes, but the key thing that I will say about this theory of action is that we have learned, and we've evolved our approach, and you heard a little bit about this as I got started, is that if we're not intentional from the outset around centering equity and racial equity in this work, and really specifically talking about, we were always talking about the elimination of locally defined disparities, and that is critical. That's what we want to see. But in order to do that, we have to create more equitable systems. So advancing equity as one of our core principles, I will say those principles stay foundational, but that is one that was revised in more recent iterations of the theory of action. because we had to move from looking at elimination of disparities to advancing equity and really focusing on the systems transformation piece. And we added a gateway. So the way that this theory of action works is we have our 4 grounding principles, we have the way that we work with partnerships to advance the work across some milestones, and then there are gateways, and I'm getting really wonky, I shouldn't have done this, getting really wonky with the gateways of how partnerships progress. Our 4 partnerships in the room know this well. You know, you're working to building partnership infrastructure and then ultimately to where you see systems transforming. And what we're working to is really moving at least 24. We set, I should back up a little bit. We worked with our national network for 2 years ago, actually it was in 2017, right about the time that my predecessor left and I took over. We were in the process of building a new strategic plan. And we worked very closely with our network members to build this plan. And it was from our network members, we had been measuring, like the ultimate benchmark prior to 2017 was proof point. We didn't have a systems transformation gateway. And to get to proof point, a partnership needed to demonstrate that they had at least 60% of indicators across those 7 cradle-to-career outcomes trending positively, and examples of systems change. So it might be a policy change, like putting in place universal pre-K, which several of our communities have successfully passed legislation to do that. So that's a significant win to getting to proof point. And it still is a significant win. But what we heard from our network members is that if we're measuring our ultimate bar of success with proof point is measuring outcomes improving in the aggregate, then we're not getting to the real work of elimination of disparities and creating more equitable systems. And so we put in place the systems transformation gateway, and now we have set an ambitious goal of getting at least 24 communities to what we call systems transformation by 2023. And so this is a big goal. We currently have 13 communities in our national network of 67 are at proof point. And we're working to get 24 communities to systems transformation. I have every confidence in the world that the 5 communities who are in this room will get to systems transformation by 2023. It's the work that we're doing. We are going to support you to getting the system first to proof point and then to systems transformation. But why this is so important and why I'm so thrilled to have such a full room here, because I know so many of you, there are many of you from the education sector, but there are so many of you from what we would call adjacent sectors, housing, health. I know there are quite a few people in the room from the health sector, transportation, public safety, government. You are so critical to getting to more equitable systems that produce more equitable outcomes and that really work on the elimination of and reduction of disparities. And so that is what the work, that's how we're measuring systems transformations, that communities will continue to see outcomes, indicators across those 7 cradle-to-career outcomes improve, but they will also see gaps closing. And in order to do that, we have to work very closely with adjacent sectors in this work. A child, as you all know, as well as I do, children cannot learn, cannot advance across that pipeline if they're hungry, or if they are lacking stable housing, or if they don't have proper health care, or if they cannot get access safe routes to school. These are so critical, and so we can't do this work in isolation. The work was always intended to be cross-sector work, but we're really paying attention to that as we work to advance partnerships through systems transformation. And so we have worked with the network to build this new strategic plan. It's a 5-year plan. 2023, we'll have those 24 communities to systems transformation. And together with the network, we identified 7 core capacities that we need to build within cradle-to-career partnerships. We at Strive Together and in partnership with lots of national organizations and with investors to build these capacities so that we can create that tipping point. Because if we get 24 communities who are transforming systems and eliminating disparities and creating more sustainable, equitable systems, we know that we will be able to change policy, change the way that government functions in a way that is sustainable for the long term. So building these capacities are critical. So we spend a lot of time at the National Network working to build leadership capabilities. So many of our partnership team members in the room I know have participated in a lot of capability building activities and efforts. We partner very closely with the Annie E. Casey Foundation to advance their results count leadership work, which has been transformative because this work is hard and it requires a special type of leadership, adaptive leadership that leads from behind with informal authority. And so these are critical skills to be able to be in this work for the long haul. Build that data capability and working to partner so that communities have data infrastructure and are able to access the data they need to drive decision making, to be able to identify which populations in the community they need to target and to implement targeted strategies. And that leads to practice acceleration and improvement. But the last three up top, and then I'll spend a few more moments on equity. But the last three up top, I think, communications mobilization, policy advocacy, communications and engagement, policy advocacy and mobilization, as well as investment and sustainability, are core areas that we're very focused on right now with our network. We have not done a good enough job figuring out how to communicate about this work. It's very complex. There is no line item in a city budget that calls for funding a backbone organization. And so really figuring out how to explain the value proposition of these very important very important backbone organizations in communities and the results that they're able to get is a critical piece that we're working on nationally and then together with our partnerships. Similarly, as I'm going to talk about in a moment, policy advocacy and mobilization is a key focus of the work because transforming systems means creating better, more equitable policies, and it means changing the way funding flows in communities, in states, and ultimately at the federal level. And so we're doubling down on our policy work. And then last but not least, this is long-term work. We're talking about transforming systems, and so there needs to be the right level of investment in the work. So before I get into some of the lessons, what I want to share with all of you is, I'm actually going to share some lessons that come right here from the state of Connecticut, which I'm so excited about. And like I said, it's great for me because, in all honesty, I was more of Jeff was the charismatic kind of out there visionary, and I was more of figuring out how to get things done on the ground for many years. And so I didn't go to as many communities as he did. So being here in Norwalk and the community, whenever I get back to, or I know I'm in Bridgeport right now. I do know that, I'm sorry. Being back in Connecticut and close to Norwalk and being in Connecticut, because I know so much of Connecticut's a unique place because just the fact that so many of you overlap and the potential and how you're learning together as I love that the partnership directors are meeting monthly. This is really incredible. So I do want to share just a little bit about what we're learning and what we're sharing with our broader network from right here in Connecticut. So starting with Bridge to Success in Waterbury. So you all know well that the Waterbury Partnership convenes more than 100 organizations really working across the cradle to career continuum. But what I'm so excited about, I'm excited about a lot in Waterbury, but I think this idea of think tanks, particularly as it relates to racial equity work, youth engagement work, and family engagement. As you're going to see in a few minutes, we just finished a 5-year evaluation, and one of the real gaps in our work over the years has been how do you authentically engage and authorize community authority, make sure that community is authorized to co-develop solutions. And so I'm really excited about the work that Bridge to Success is doing as it relates to those think tanks, those networks that are really thinking about family engagement and equity as well as youth advocacy in this work. Next, Bridgeport prospers. So we're excited that we've been partnering at Strive Together with the Pritzker Children's Initiative and the National Collaboration on Infants and Toddlers. And as Allison knows, they cannot stop talking about Bridgeport Prosper's baby bundle. And this is something that is incredible for Bridgeport, incredible for the state of Connecticut, and really can be scalable nationally, and I know that it will be. For those of you who don't know the baby bundle, it's a group of supports from 0 to 3. It just makes sense. I mean, it's kind of like, obviously we should be working this way, but this is not how it typically works, where you're really looking at starting with pregnant women and providing supports to pregnant women and children and families and caregivers in a really systematic and data-driven way that is very replicable and absolutely should be supported with public resources. And so I'm very, very excited about the potential for scaling the baby bundle and building on that key lesson learned. Next, Norwalk Acts. We have something that we call at Strive Together a network navigator, where each Strive Together team member has a group of partnerships who they work with. They won't let me have any sites anymore because of my role. They think that's not fair. But I used to be Norwalk Acts navigator, and so thrilled to see the progress here, and really there's progress across the continuum, but what comes to mind for me is the prenatal to 3 work, and specifically around home visitation, where working to make sure that everyone in the community, community members, caregivers, parents, understand the ages and stages questionnaire. So they ask you and are using this data to drive supports and services in prenatal to 3 work. This is definitely an innovative practice that can be replicable and shared across the network. And in fact, we did create a video about this work that we shared recently at our convening. And then last but not least, we have Stanford Cradle to Career. The work here, again, incredible work across the continuum, but near and dear to my heart, given my college access, college attainment background, with the Bridge to College initiative, which is a summer melt pilot for first-generation college students. So it's a partnership between Stanford Public Schools, Norwalk Community College, and a number of local partners that really works to make sure that those most vulnerable children, those children who are young people who are first generation to college, that they step foot on that college campus, which is that critical step. So working across the summer to do that. And there's so much more work happening in those communities, but I wanted to highlight a few of just the best practices that we're so fortunate to get to share across the network. And I'm looking at the time because I'm just making sure that I'm keeping time. Another thing I didn't do today is bring my phone up here to keep time. So anyway, where I was is the 4 communities who are working so closely together here, and obviously having South Bronx so close by, South Bronx Rising Together, there's a great opportunity. But this is the network, what we call the network effect in our work. We are constantly learning and iterating on this work. It's cutting edge work. It's leading edge for the nation in terms of how this work works, and it's really being driven by the partnerships in our network. And I just mentioned that we did an evaluation. We participated in a 5-year evaluation with Equal Measure, which is a national evaluation partner, and we just released the results. If you're really interested in evaluation and methodology, you can find that information on our website. But we were very excited. The evaluation was meant to answer 2 questions. First, how does Cradle to Career civic infrastructure emerge in communities, and does it emerge and does it go along with the theory of action? So we were really looking at validating our theory of action as a way that civic infrastructure is built in communities. And then the second evaluation question was, if you have civic infrastructure in your community, does it have an impact on contributing indicators to those 7 Cradle to Career outcomes? And the great news is the answer to both questions, based on 5 years of data collection, was yes. And there are lots more questions to be answered about how this work happens, but what I think is most valuable for us in the spirit of continual learning and continual growth across a network is that we learned where partnerships are getting tripped up, where they're struggling the most. There were 20 partnerships in the evaluation who we did deep dive data in collection around, and so these 4 areas emerged as areas as a network, and I've mentioned this already, where we need to spend some more time in supporting our network. And I just gave some examples of how we can learn from our Connecticut communities across a few of these, and I'll share a few examples from the network before I wrap up. But you can see engage the community, advancing equity in the work, also addressing policy. I've already mentioned the importance of that, and sustaining resources. So that emerged from the evaluation at the same time that our network members were identifying those 7 capacities. So there's clearly some validation of these as key areas to work. So I'm going to start with really engaging the community. And when I think about the work that we did back in Cincinnati back in 2006, we thought we were engaging the community. But we were doing some listening sessions. We were having we're bringing pizza in, cake diplomacy, our partnership in Portland, Oregon, all hands raised. They call it cake diplomacy. We were going around having listening sessions. We weren't authentically engaging and authorizing community to take up their authority in this work and to really own the work in the way that so many of our partnerships across the network, including right here in Connecticut, are doing now. So I highlight Graduate Tacoma. They are one of our proof point partnerships that I mentioned before. They were one of the dropout factories back when that report was released many years ago. The Tacoma Public Schools had a 55% graduation rate. Today they have an 89% graduation rate, so they've made a tremendous amount of progress. But what they've really done extremely well is engage the community. When you go to Tacoma, you see Graduate Tacoma, yard signs everywhere, billboards. The community owns it. They know their high school graduation rate. Anyone in the community that you ask knows this because they've made it a community effort, and they've engaged community at all levels. And so you see a picture here of a barber, and the local barber shops in Tacoma are centers of community. And so in Tacoma, they have a Books to Barbershops initiative where they have books there, and the barbers are engaged in helping the young children who are in the shop to increase their literacy. And so that's just one of many ways that Graduate Tacoma is engaging and really authorizing the community to develop solutions. This was definitely a co-developed solution with some of the local barbers in the community. Next, another proof point partnership in Northfield, Minnesota. So in Northfield, you can see up here their outcomes are improving. So all of our partnerships who are proof point, as I mentioned, are seeing an increase in outcomes in the aggregate currently, as well as systems change. But the reason I chose Northfield for this particular example around community engagement and advancing equity is they have really worked to get young people on boards. So they have more than 85 local board seats that are filled by young people, and not just your token, okay, we have a young person on the school board who sits there and isn't really a voting member. These are voting members of boards, young people who are actively engaged in city government, in district leadership, and they have authority, and they are advocating for what they need, and really being very vocal advocates. And the other thing that I will say is when we learned about this process for how they get young people on the board, they're blind applications. So a lot of times you will have, and I've been a part of these efforts where you have young people on boards who are the usual suspects. Maybe they're very active children leaders in there who are identified by a teacher or someone. This is a process that actually looks to identify very diverse young leaders and activate them to be a part of policymaking in the Northfield community. So moving on to policy and advocacy, which is a critical area of focus for us, and there's so much opportunity here in Connecticut with multiple partnerships and all of the incredible support you have in the room. But we're increasingly seeing states where we have multiple partnerships come together and really advocate for, and very successfully, for state policy wins. So I'm going to talk about two of those very quickly. In Minnesota, we had several of our Cradle to Career Network partnerships came together with two promise neighborhoods. Very similar, but kind of effort, and we actually are increasingly partnering with promise neighborhoods nationally. But these community partnerships came together, and they advocated in urban communities and rural communities. So this was critical for the state of Minnesota. They advocated for support for their backbones. They actually have written in to their state legislation, passed a funding stream for Cradle to Career backbone work, and it comes out of their Department of Education funding stream, but they receive state money to actually do the backbone work. A different example of a significant policy win that is more recent is in Texas, where we have multiple partnerships. We have 4 partnerships there, the Commit partnership in Dallas, E3 Alliance, which is not in the Rio Grande Valley. I'm noticing that those slides are a little bit mixed up there. E3 Alliance is in Central Texas. RGV Focus is in the Rio Grande Valley, and UP Partnership is in San Antonio. So these 4 partnerships, they came together along with state advocates, along with Teach Plus, which is a national organization that mobilizes teachers as advocates, and they advocated successfully for the largest, most significant historic education legislation to ever happen in Texas. They have secured $6.5 billion. I'm not used to saying $billion when I'm talking about this work. $6.5 billion for education, and it's really cross sector. It's really mobility, money to support putting children on the path toward mobility, because it's really about driving more equitable outcomes in the state of Texas, and it was very much needed because in the state of Texas, education has been underfunded consistently for many, many years, and that $6.5 billion can be leveraged to get an additional $5 billion. So communities will get more than $11 billion of new money. Now the key now is, as they've passed the legislation, and now the key that the partnerships are working on is to make sure that money actually gets to where it belongs. So the implementation work is so critical. But that is one of the roles that this Cradle to Career civic infrastructure can play in communities, to make sure that the money goes where it belongs. And those 4 partnerships, I was just in Texas a couple weeks ago, meeting, I was in the Rio Grande Valley as well as in Dallas, and talking with them about the work they're doing right now on the ground to make sure that money comes to their districts. And then last but not least, the sustainable resources. So this work requires patient capital. It is, I've said probably 6 times already, and I'll say it again, that this is long-term work. Change like this doesn't happen in a day, in a year. We see lots of incremental progress, but if you're looking for a magic silver bullet program to advance outcomes, this is not the work. However, if you're looking for sustainable change for over time, then this is the work and the approach, and it does require investment. We're fortunate that more and more national investors are seeing the value in investing in place-based work that drives systems changes for many, many years. And you all have experienced this in communities on the ground, nonprofits who are, you're able to raise money for program interventions, and not the systemic work that you need to do to really shift outcomes at scale. And I'm seeing more of that happen, but we need more to do this work. Because ultimately, the private philanthropic investment can drive the public shift. And that's something that I'm going to share a quick video on sort of how that's happening. The public shifting of dollars is happening in one of our communities in Memphis. So we'll see if this works.
So I'm mayor of Shelby County. Shelby County is the largest, one of the most diverse counties in our state with 950,000 citizens. We know that it's important that more families in our community, regardless of their household income, have access to a pre-K education.
Our organization has been advocating for as universal a pre-K program as possible for Memphis children. Our pre-K program was historically funded through a federal expansion grant, and that program had served 1,000 children over the last 4 years. But that federal grant, like all grants, expire, and so we started having conversations here locally about how do we sustain this very important program, but not just sustain it, but continue to scale it and continue to improve it.
We were at a conference put together by Strive Together, the national network, and we met the team from Seeding Success, and we really realized pretty quickly that there was a way to expand pre-K in Memphis using outcomes financing.
Our city and county government stepped up and were interested in funding, didn't really know how, what the mechanisms would be. We had attempted some tax increases in the past, which failed, but I think it was a real partnership between Seeding Success and Macomb that allowed us to find a path where we were able to identify the most effective programs, understand what the outcomes of those programs have been and what they could be, and then build an economic model and a financing model around that.
Outcomes financing is where private sector investors come into a community and provide the upfront financing to expand needed services. For government, the value proposition is pretty simple. They identify the priority, they decide on the metrics, and then they only pay when the program works.
We track data internally at Seeding Success to make sure those programs are delivering the outcomes that we intend them to get. So attendance in program, we're looking at early literacy gains, and then we're looking at how those kids perform when they first get to kindergarten.
There's a third party that's always at the table. So in this case, it's the University of Memphis. They have some folks who have been working with the partners on the ground around data collection, and they will review the data, and that is the data that will then lead to the outcome payments.
The benefits of an outcomes finance program has been, let's design success into the program, and let's establish accountability in a way that allows us not just to point the finger and hold people accountable, but to jump in and help if we see things going the wrong way.
Great. So I think that is a great example of how we work to transform systems, to transform the way government works, because in this work, we know that we will not be able to support the long-term outcomes and change that puts children and families on the path toward mobility without really transforming systems, without making it so that funding flows differently, especially public funding. And so this is a creative way to be able to do that, a way that is working. And I know I was already excited in talking about there's a possibility of how we might figure out how to do that here in Connecticut. And I think there's an incredible opportunity to do this across the country. But as I wrap up, I think more than anything, I just want to say that you are doing really incredible work here across the state, and your 4 partnerships. I'm so excited to be here with them and to be able to learn and continue to learn from you. I'm thankful for all of you who are supporting these partnerships in different ways as providers who are doing the work that's closest to children and families on the ground, as investors who are supportive of this work and in it for the long term, when I know that can be hard for investors to make that long-term commitment to this type of work, for your government leaders who are with us, who are supportive of this work. You all have an incredible role to play, and most importantly, we know that we'll be able to achieve this success if we just listen to what our children need. And we were so fortunate at our 10th annual convening just in September to have Stacey Abrams join us to speak with us, and she was incredible for those of you who were there, and it was incredible. But what she said that has stuck with me is, if you want to know how to help a struggling child, listen to a struggling child. And we don't do enough of that. And so one of the things One of the things that I'm going to leave you with this video, and I may have gone over my time, so we'll see if I have time to answer any questions, but I'm going to leave you with this video that shows just kind of how the dreams of children, we've been doing this success campaign, Success Together campaign, and listening to what children dream, and so here it is.
Success to me means putting your best foot forward.
Success to me means being prepared to pass all your classes.
To me, success is being able to manifest your goals.
To set a goal for yourself or others and strive to achieve your goal.
It's also in the everyday when you show up and give 110% and you try to make yourself better and you try to make others better.
It's having the confidence to admit when you need help or having the pride to help someone else.
Success to me is just always knowing in my head that God's got me and God's the way to go.
Success is like doing my best effort, like giving my best effort and seeing like the best possible outcome of it.
Success means to me to just believe in yourself and set good expectations and strive to make your achievements.
For me, success means being happy and loving what you do. It's not about how much money you bring home every month. It's about continuing to challenge yourself and learn every day. Because that's how you grow as a person and experiencing new things.
Success means to finish my goals. If I do them or not, I'm still happy.
Success means to me that you don't fail and that you're being happy.
Success to me means to accomplish a goal that I set out to do, no matter how big or small.
Success means to me on how I reach my goals on my race car.
To me, success is when you've reached your goal and what you've done has paid off.
Oh, gosh.
What else does it mean to you?
Rugged.
Success is achievement that you accomplish.
Success means to me accomplishing something that I have wanted to accomplish before, or accomplishing a goal that I set for myself.
Success means doing what you enjoy in life and not failing at it. So some people actually success might mean just not failing at something. When to me, success can mean lots of things.
So my definition of success is feeling accomplished and satisfied with what you did, I guess.
To me, it can be taken in two ways, where the first way is when you achieve something that you really wanted to do and you had a goal and you got that. Or it's just when you accomplish something that makes you happy and makes you feel good, which also is what success means to me.
Success means peace, love, and compassion to the world.
Brother? Success is setting a goal for yourself and then achieving it and persevering, no matter if that be graduating high school and going to college, continuing college and getting your degree and going all the way for your master's. As long as you set a goal for yourself and you go through every obstacle and achieve that goal, then that is what success is to me.
Doing your absolute best and keep striving to meet your goal and do better.
Success to me is knowing your personal goal and knowing what you need to do, not comparing yourself to others and achieving your own personal goal.
Success to me is just like setting a goal for yourself and for your community and with everybody else and reaching that goal and still striving to go forward and keep past that.
What does success mean to you?
Thank you.